Our next speaker is Krista Burdine. She is here to show us how contributing to open source can boost your career. In her talk, Make Your Open Source Story Work for You, she'll explore 5 key benefits: financial, psychological, social, educational, and freedom, and how to highlight them on your resume. This is especially useful for students, job hunters, or anyone considering a career pivot. Let's give a warm welcome to Krista.
Thank you, Alex, for that lovely introduction. You're doing just an A-plus job this morning moderating this room. And a special thanks to Bryna, who organized this entire career day path, this track. I am just so impressed with all of the talks that we've already had today. If you missed it this morning, Mary spoke about interviewing from the perspective of a recruiter, which is really valuable. And then Amy talked a little bit about what it is to be part of an open source community. All of that is really important, and there are things that I thought I would address in my talk, and I didn't need to because somebody else had already talked about them. So I get to focus on your resume, and I hope that today I can give you something valuable. Because every open source contributor has a story. Maybe you have fixed a bug somewhere along the way, maybe you wrote a doc, maybe you've just been a lurker in an open source community for a while. But here's the thing, every piece of that experience is something that is valuable, and today we're going to talk about turning that open source experience into resume language that is useful in a job search. Before we start, let's see if I can click on the right window. So there we go. All right, so my name is Krista. I'm Krista Burdine. I'm an inclusive tech advocate, and here's my story. I was originally a writer, proofreader, and editor for independent novelists, but after a while I could not any longer read any more Hallmark-style romance novels. So I decided I needed to skill myself into something different. So I wanted to learn technical writing. That seemed like something that would give me a good opportunity. So I started out by joining a documentation team of a new project at the time called Rocky Linux. So I had no idea what I was starting. I don't know how many of you got into open source by accident, but that was my accident. I stumbled into it. And then one thing led to another. I've contributed to the documentation, and then shortly I ended up working in the community. And for the last 2 years, I've been serving as the community team lead for the Rocky Linux project, which was way more than I ever signed on to do. And it's been a wild ride. It's given me so many experiences. I've gotten to travel the world. I've gotten to meet people everywhere. I've gotten to make connections. And I've gotten to learn a whole lot about community and interacting with people and being effective. And now, since the end of last year, I get to say I'm an international speaker because I got to go to Argentina last year and speak. So it's amazing what open source can give to you. And now what we get to talk about is it giving back and us being able to get something out of it, which I think is okay because we're giving it everything we've got. One thing you'll see up here is that I'm a cat person and a horse show mom. And you may know the word horse as a four-legged animal that people ride, but I know it as a very expensive word. So I have had a great time volunteering my time with the Rocky Linux project and volunteering in open source, but my motivation and what got me here today is that I needed to figure out how to translate my open source skills into resume language and parlay that into some sort of economic advantage for myself so that I could fund those 3 words there. So that's me. So that's where we are. We're kind of learning this together. I have done some research, and we're gonna practice some things that will help us be more confident in what we're doing. So I'm also road testing a new application that I've never done before, but we're going to do a little bit of interactive presenting. So I'd like you to all get out your phones and screenshot or snap, I think is the word, that QR code so you can join our presentation, and you should be able to see the slides on your phone that way. So shout out for making the whole presentation accessible if you can't read this all the way from back there. And then we will practice right now. So the question for today is, what are you hoping to gain from this session? So if you can answer that, the answers should all come up on here. And I want everybody to put an answer, even if it doesn't answer the question, just something so that you can practice participating in the poll, because we'll get to something a little bit later where it'll help us all to work together. And I can't quite see it, so I don't know if we have any responses. I don't know where we see the responses. That is an excellent question. Oh, here we go. I should have planned a soundtrack for this part. Walking music. All right, so what I'm seeing, just for my curiosity, are you able to see on your phone these answers? Do they show up there too? Okay, great. So we've got understanding how to quantify any open source experience for my resume. That's great, because quantify turns out to be the key word today. I'd like to learn more about resume keywords to use in my resume, learning about open source community, what language are recruiters looking for to get me an interview. I'm curious about leveraging open source to improve my business. I love that they leave that QR code and somebody could write something behind it. That's awesome. Different perspectives, free candy. I have failed. Learn how to guide my students in contributing to open source and how to explain my open source experience in an interview. So some of those, I'm going to encourage you to look at the recordings later, because Mary gave an excellent talk. Which one? What language recruiters are looking for to get into an interview. She gave excellent perspectives on that, so I highly recommend that if you didn't get a chance to see her speak this morning, that you look for that when the talks are posted later. Well worth your time. And learning more about open source community is what Amy just spoke about in the last hour. So she did a great job of outlining the different roles within a community and the ways people can contribute. And I've let you down on the candy. Maybe there's probably some out there. All right, so when I think about open source, it doesn't take very much to get me excited. I'll start waxing eloquent, and it's crazy. Because to me, at its heart, the DNA, the values of open source, at the very heart of it, is inclusive. It's important to me that everybody has a chance to contribute. By being open and inclusive, open source can benefit from all of the perspectives that everybody brings to it. The more perspectives you have looking at a thing, the better chance you have of describing it accurately. So this is a quote, a very important quote. Open source is the collaboration of passionate minds coming together to share tech ideas and solutions for the good of the world, and you can credit me. I'm pre-famous, so I'm quoting myself. But one of my concerns is that open source is not always accessible because not everyone has the luxury of donating their time into the greater good and all that open source aspires to be. And so to me, that's why it's so important and so relevant for open source contributors to be able to translate what we're doing into resume language so that we can find a way to do what we love and also have an income from that. So if the work you're actually doing and getting paid for, like the job you get is in open source, that's great. But this can be used to get jobs in open source or beyond, because I think the tech industry as a whole benefits from the existence of open source and the skills you learn in open source. I feel like I'm talking really fast. Is everybody tracking with me, or should I slow down to Texas speed? No, we're good. Okay, excellent. And I say that because I moved to Texas and I met somebody in the grocery store and he was like, "You're not from around here, are you?" I have been now for most of my life, but I was new once. So our purpose today is to help you develop an accurate resume that reflects your skills, whether you end up getting a job in open source or one that just appreciates the value of your experience. I've said it already today, but collaboration in open source is a two-way street. What you give, you also get back. We know open source is value because it builds accessible software, but I didn't ever finish that sentence in my notes, so we're going to just move on. Anyway, the beauty of open source is that it builds and equips great contributors. And so what we're focusing on here is how open source experience benefits you and how to communicate that value to employers. I think we've made a good case here, but today we're going to look at a clear, practical formula that you can walk away with for turning your open source work into resume-ready language. And then at the end, I will have a resource sheet for you that you can access and use for further research. I'll also be quoting some of the sources that I've used in putting this together so you can go follow them. There are people that are talking about resumes out there, and there are a few that I particularly have found useful. All right. Quick check. Nod your head before I lose you. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar. I'm just a beginner. Why would my contributions matter? Everyone here in this community is smarter or more experienced than me, so my contributions aren't important. Woo, I got lucky that PR was accepted. I hope nobody figures out what a mess it was. Wow, if I ask for help, maybe people will think I don't belong here, so I better just figure it all out on my own. Do some of those sound familiar? Newsflash, all of those thoughts are called imposter syndrome. And the one thing I have learned, if I had to distill it down to one, I might come up with three. But the one thing that I would like to say right now is everybody has imposter syndrome. So I think we should just all assume that everyone has it and cancel that out as a factor in our decisions. So if you think you're not good enough, cancel it out. It has nothing to do with that. Just go ahead and try. Go ahead and contribute, and go ahead and understand that what you are contributing is part of the success story of that project that you're working in. So, this is how we reframe those thoughts. What you do in open source is real experience. Which leads us to the question of what is it that employers are actually looking for in your resume? Again, third time's a charm. Go back and watch Mary's talk from this morning. Talking from the perspective of the recruiter, she told us the kinds of things she's looking for. That is super valuable. We're going to get important things, but definitely check out. She's going to have a lot to add. I believe here we have, okay. So, but the first thing that they're looking for, that an employer or a recruiter wants, is quantifiable skills, such as certifications. Actually, certifications is outside the scope of this talk today about resumes and turning your skills into resume language. However, the person speaking after me, I believe her name's Adriana. I didn't write it down. I did, but I can't find it. She is actually speaking, Adriana, thank you, is speaking about certifications. So if that's a curiosity for you, please stick around and listen to her speak about that piece of what recruiters are looking for. The second thing they're looking for is other quantifiable metrics. And in this way, words are hard. It's the end of a long weekend. Emily Warden is a career coach that I follow on LinkedIn. I have followed her for a year or a while, and everything she posts, I feel like that's right. She's hitting me right where I'm at in my search. And one of the things that she talks about is how to add quantifiable metrics to your resume. So let's try this, applying her words to open source experience. And consider what you've done in open source. Just try and take a moment and pull that into your mind. What metrics exist in your project for measuring progress? Do you have annual checks in your project, like where you say, we want to accomplish this, and then you can see whether you've accomplished it. I guess those are roadmaps. I'm thinking of examples such as, how many issues do you have open in GitHub? Do you count how many issues have been opened or how many have been closed? Do you count the number of contributors you have in your project within GitHub or within your project, wherever the home of it is? In my project, it's a Mattermost instance, but you may have another chat server or a forum or a discourse or something where everybody congregates. If you know what the metrics are, you can say whether or not you were helping to meet them or not. And then the second step of that would be to quantify that thing. So if I'm contributing to open source, how many, how much, how long, how often? All of those are questions that help you articulate what you've done. So I've helped close issues in GitHub. I've helped close 10 issues in GitHub. I have added seven documents to the documentation. Quantifying it helps recruiters see the extent to which you've done it or the amount of effort you've put to it. And then add a time frame to it that will strengthen it. So I've added 7 documents to the documentation in my project in the first 90 days that I was volunteering. Now they can see how fast I was volunteering. I've been a part of that project for 2 years, but in the first 90 days alone, I created a style guide and 3 other child guides from that, and whatever those things are. By doing that, or I mentored somebody into membership within my organization. I mentored 5 people in the first year I was a part of that organization. That is a part of how it becomes quantifiable. Unfortunately, a lot of what we do in open source, there's a lot that's technical, but there's a whole soft skills side of volunteering. There's leadership and communication and initiative and collaboration. All of those are skills that are important, but how do you quantify that? And I think that's maybe the real crux of what we need to learn how to do, and that I would like to have us develop today or articulate today. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to take a skill and we're going to put an action verb on it. And then we're going to say what we did, and then we're going to say what kind of impact we had. So an example of that would be, I wrote documentation for my open source project. And then we're going to change it and say, okay, I authored clear and user-friendly documentation for my project. And by doing so, I improved the ability of other people in the project to contribute, and we received more contributions after that because it made onboarding easier. And if you can put a percentage on it, we had 30% more documentation requests in the 90 days after that than we did in the 90 days before that, or something. That's the challenge. That's where the work is, I think, in trying to articulate what we're doing, to sit down and take a minute and say, what has changed? It might take talking to people within your project to say, how do we count these metrics? Or it might take manually counting them, but I know I'm in the company of a lot of people who know how to automate things. So I'm sure you can find people in your project that can help you with automating that search for a metric. Okay, cool. That's great to know. I even put the example on there. Okay, so now we're going to try a second instance of this group presentation. And I would like you to take a minute and submit to me a skill or experience that you have used in open source. And I'm going to go so far as to say a skill or an experience you know people have in open source, because there are a lot more things out there than just what we in this room have done. There are a lot more things. So we already have people. We're going to do a word cloud today. So as you add things, we're going to see skills. Time for more walking music. Ooh, Docker's a good one. I'm going to give you all another minute. Everybody can participate. Be careful, because I might make you talk to somebody next. That's a cute looking little word cloud. And again, even if you see it up here, go ahead and add it again if that's something that you agree with. I want to see if the words get bigger if somebody says the same thing twice. That GitHub is a big one, man. That was my biggest learning curve when I came into open source. Oh, yeah. I want to see that one. Ooh, sideways. Okay, so debugging is a skill. Learning how to do pipelines, project management, writing in a concise manner, Git, GitHub, Nix, resolving merge conflicts. Oh gosh. My computer liked that one so much it quit. I thought I did. Yeah, I thought I'd turned that off, but I didn't. I know just enough tech to get by, but it's good. There's room for technical and non-technical people in tech. All right. I had this idea of dividing into groups, but I think we can just do it by submitting up here. We're going to go to another page. So I don't know if you want to screenshot that or screenshot it on your phone so you can refer back to it. And we're going to practice saying these in terms of our formula, right? Of saying, how can I add ooh, I got lots of thumbs up from that. And seeing if we can do this, where we put an action verb on it and say what we did and say how it benefited our project, all right? And I'll give you a few minutes to work on it. Are you all ready for me to move to the next screen? And okay, we're doing it. Okay, so now we're going to practice the open source skills. So take the thing that you wrote before, try to rephrase it as an action verb, what you actually did, or the verb, and then what you actually did, and then the impact it had on your project. We're going to see how this works, and this is the moment we find out how well I did at preparing you. And now I really need music. We could play a whole song while we do this, because it's okay to take a minute. While you're working, I would like to say, as I think about it, I think a lot of these can be categorized into certain categories. And maybe that will also help us in figuring out how to apply this to all the different skills. So there are categories of technical skills, which I saw the Git and the GitHub Actions and the Docker and all of that. That's good technical skills. So think about how a technical skill might actually be easier, perhaps, to turn into a quantifiable metric, because you can say, by using Docker, I've speeded up my problem solving by X%. I don't know. Then there's also ones that are more about leadership and collaboration. Collaboration is a great one if you can find a way to translate that into a metric. Then there's project management or marketing, and then there's the documentation. Alex, we're going to have some questions here, I think. I might ask some questions out loud, and I think we already have a question. Just give it 1 second.
Oh, you hold it. Okay. So my question's on metrics. You mentioned about collaboration. So how would you quantify collaboration as metrics? I also work on cybersecurity. A lot of the things we do, it's hard to quantify. Well, if you have a breach, maybe how much money you can save for doing the cybersecurity work. So what are your recommendations? Because we all know we need to quantify certain things, but it's hard to come up with that value. So what do you recommend?
I think that is the crux of the challenge that we have, to turn that soft skill of collaboration into something measurable. Defining a percent part is hard, but you can say we deal with collaboration, or we deal with problem-solving cybersecurity incidents X number of times in a month. And out of that percentage, we have managed to avert a major crisis every single time, or we've only had one major crisis in the last X number of, I don't know. That's how I would approach it. Resolved user stories. It's always with the action verbs. What do we think? If you say I resolved 100 JIRA stories, put an amount of time on that, in a certain amount of time, yeah. I don't know how impressive that is, but the right person would. Alex, we have another one over here.
Working in the open education process, what I did was I singularly made low-cost bachelors for over 220 million students worldwide using the open community.
Okay, yeah, so then you had numbers with that, and it sounds, it's a good competency. Is there anyone in your project that can validate that? Yeah, well, there you go. So, I think showing your credentials is adds strength to it, right? Every piece on every bullet point that you can do that lends credibility to your whole overall story. Let's see, we have a containerized we containerized application with Podman to reduce deployment times by 70%. I like the sound of that. That sounds strong. Introduced an additional step to GitHub Actions that streamlined the PR process. Unquantifiable. Could you look in the past and see how many PRs had been done in a certain amount of time, in 30 days, or however much, and then see how many were done in the 30 days after that? Maybe that would give a quantification. That gives you a number that way. And I'm willing to take any other input, too, if anybody has suggestions based on these. Validate automations by observing outputs against goals, which improved efficacy of the automations. So you made your process more efficient. That's good. I wonder if the automations are moving faster now. Can you quantify how much time it takes to run an automation? Yeah, those are, I think those work. Does anybody have any other input on these ones that have been submitted? I appreciate everybody who is participating. Walking music. Yes, oh, we have more interaction.
Yeah, okay. So when I think about automation, I always think about, does that mean when you have to quantify that, can you say something that you release the software, that you deploy the software much faster in terms of how many times, like if you have previous metrics, you can say, now I did this automation, now we deploy to the production server like 3 times more. So that would be something, right?
Yeah,
If you
that's a
have
number.
Yeah, if you have previous metrics that you can compare. But
Yeah,
some of the
previous
stuff
metrics
is
are
like
good.
we do in cybersecurity is not as easy as software engineering, software development. So, but that's what I would do, right?
It seems like anytime you can put a number in it, whether it's a percent or an amount of time or a number of things that happened, and especially if you can say the things that happened in a specific amount of time, that's the key to making it sound more credible. So yeah, that's a good start. Well, I think this has been a good, I don't know. Does it make sense? Does anyone continue to have questions about the process? Does it seem workable, like something practical, like something you could apply to your experience? Oh, we got another one. Now I'm going to have to do walking music again. If I had my phone set up, I could do it that way. Okay, using pipelines to effectively sort commands how I'd like to. For example, sorting data numerically with timestamps and date specification. Okay, so you've figured out how to customize a pipeline. You customized pipelines to sort commands according to demand. And maybe talk about how that improved your speed at developing a pipeline. I really appreciate your participation.
I'm an outsider, so I can see. I work in cybersecurity, so but I do see when you put something about like sorting stuff, you're helping to increase the whatever the efficiency of the pipeline. What you can say is previously how long it takes for this pipeline to run through, right? But now you do this. What was it? Doing some search.
Sorting commands,
Right,
like sorting
now
data.
you can say now it takes so much better in terms of how much time you save, right? It used to be this, now is this, the entire pipeline. So I think that's what you're saying.
As a result, yeah.
Quantify, you have to put something like, otherwise it's not as strong like you said.
Right, it
You
needs
need
something
to,
on the end of it
right,
to say that it improved the speed of...
yeah, it used to take this long, now it is this time, right? So that's what I would recommend.
Right. And yeah, again, I think that's the crux of what we're doing, trying to articulate that. What was it? What did I do? And now how is it? More interactions.
In her particular capacity, the thing is that you'll never know what she prevented in her cybersecurity. That's the problem.
That's the trick.
And so, how does you relate that to an employer? In other words, how do you say, me working on this particular project prevented this kind of a thing? And I guess the only way to do that is we've had no inclusions or phishing type things. In other words, that's about the only way you can really prove that you've been effective in cybersecurity kind of a thing.
I agree. It's hard to prove what didn't happen, what didn't go wrong as a result of what you've done. And all I can think of is, the little sign in the factory that says we've gone X number of days without an incident. But it's probably way more complicated than that. Yeah. But are you aware that attacks are happening that you're preventing ever? Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah. Well, that's good. Okay. One more over here.
Yeah, I was thinking of maybe using, you could possibly say prevented potential major breaches, um, because even a small, relatively low level vulnerability can be chained together to form to create a bigger breach. So even with that small possibility or that small vulnerability, it does there is the potential that it could become something major. Point in case, there was a Bitcoin platform in Saudi Arabia, and this guy who had a laptop, one of the creators, had a laptop, and that was compromised. That led to like $1 billion heist on this platform. So I think it would be fair to say potential major threat without being maybe over exaggerating.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's, I mean, every little bit we can do can help articulate that.
One thing with maybe the cybersecurity or some of that stuff, or sorry, two things. What is it? It's sort of like insurance, right? And like you said, proving something that didn't happen.
Proving
is a hard
something,
thing,
yes.
But you're giving peace of mind, right? You buy insurance for that peace
Right.
of mind that if something does happen.
Mm-hmm.
But more to the point is, you know, what is it? What's the environment that you're working on? You know, is it, you know, are you protecting, you know, 100 or 1,000 desktops from intrusions or servers or APIs or firewall? You know,
Right.
some of that, you know, you can kind of validate the scale
Or maybe
and the technology.
measuring the number of technologies that you are coordinating together in order to be preventive of that. All right, so let's look at this next one. Migrated a CI/CD pipeline off of deprecated technologies, restoring functionality of the build process and reducing build times by 20%. That's got an action verb, it's got a thing, what you did, and it has an impact that has a number in it. So I think that's a strong one.
For this one, I was thinking, what do you think about reducing build time by 20% to the top, and then and describing how you did it, just for emphasis?
You could. It goes. You're going off the trail here with our formula, but you're welcome to be original with it. Yeah, so this has been great. I really appreciate you all engaging with this idea. I think it does have some merit to it. I think, you know, we might fumble at first trying to figure out what those metrics are, but the act of looking for it will help us really dial into what we've actually done. And the more you do that, the more you value your own time working in the open source. So I want to just help distill this into a few key takeaways. The first one really is, oh, that's long. To use the resume formula to quantify and communicate your open source impact. And that quantify, I think, is going to be our key word that we're going to work toward in everything that we're doing. I do have a caveat, which is your resume isn't the only way that you're going to get a job. Other people have discussed this earlier, and other people will discuss this later. A resume is a piece of trying to find employment or find connections. You need to network with people. So I was fortunate enough to find a mentor last year who helped talk me through how to do what I was doing better and more efficiently. And then I have the advantage of that person's full network who has 10 years in community experience to be able to communicate with him. And be able to say, hey, I'm looking for a job or something. And he is able to serve as a reference for the work that I already did and to recommend me to things that I could do in the future. And then this last bit is never stop growing your network. That's another piece. I put lots of great points in there. I don't remember, so good for us. Follow resume support thought leaders. And what do we have in here? And leverage the low cost and free trainings, which is what they'll cover in the next one. I want to cut back to something from the beginning just to close this out, which is that the resume is important and networking is good. I started at this process because of putting together my resume and articulating what I was doing because I wanted to find employment and actually get paid for my work in open source. And it's funny because I put the whole resume together, but then it's really been more of a networking experience for me that by being at these events, I met somebody literally at scale last year who I have connected with a couple of times because of her project that she's working in and also because we attend the same conferences, so I've seen her a few times. And late last year, after I submitted to give this talk, actually, and had it all set up, she called and said, hey, I had this opportunity and I thought of you first. And nobody ever even looked at my resume. But the important thing is that I had written it, I had taken the time to articulate my resume so that I was confident that I did have skills that were translatable into everyday open source work. And so there is nothing lost in taking the time and the effort to do this. So that's my exciting part about resume work. Are we to the really ridiculously big QR code? This platform, this Mentimeter software that I used to do this presentation with the group interaction, I got to use the free version of it, and so it was customizable in some ways and not in others. So that's the size picture I got. This will lead you to my contact information, my LinkedIn, and my website, such as it is. But the most important thing I want you to notice on there is at the bottom there's a link to a resume resource that I have written for you. It's essentially takeaways from this. What I put in there was 20 examples of different skills of what people do in open source translated into a specific quantifiable thing, along with some references and links to articles by thought leaders in this resume and tech world, including the very first one is to Emily Warden's article that she wrote about quantifying. Anyway, it's the actual thing she wrote. It's more than I put in here. I only used one or two of her points. And is that the last bit of it? Oh, and then I think I put I put another resource in there that I forget right now, but it's important. You'll enjoy it, and I'll probably build on it after I go back and look at these results. I'll probably continue to grow that document. It's a Word doc. No, it's a Google Doc. So I hope you enjoyed that, and eventually I'll get these notes all up on the live stream as well so that you can come back and reference it later. But I really appreciate your time and attention, and hope you've had at least one piece of information that's useful for you. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, let's give it up for Krista Burdine. That was fantastic. I learned a lot. I got to say, the resume formula, action, verb, what you did, what was the impact, I thought that was amazing. I'm going to use that like today. So thank you so much. And I loved, there's room for non-technical people in tech. That was great. That's something really important that we all need to kind of remind ourselves, is that there's room for everyone in this great industry and in open source. So thank you so much.